We'll continue looking at it before we reach sentences. Now, we are looking at parts of language which are becoming more and more abstract, okay, which is again underlying patterns, okay. These underlying patterns are part of our these generative apparatus, which is to say we can look at these things or we understand these things when we try to understand generative apparatus or vice versa. So, yesterday we looked at certain underlying patterns, rules which work as a template for formation of words, where we have some templates which give us lot of words, and then the more constraints are heavier, the fewer the words, okay. With clusters of 2 consonants, we have fewer words. With a cluster of 3 consonants, we have way too fewer words, that are handful of them, and with a cluster of 4 in the beginning of a word, we have none in any language whatsoever, okay. We have looked at these things. Now, we want to look at certain more processes which add grammatical meaning to words, and we want to see how they work. I have a question from yesterday. Somebody asked about syllables. The person here? No. Okay. So, I will discuss that part later. So, let me take you through more on how to make words, okay. I want to give you some examples of Hindi, okay, and at the same time, while I am discussing these examples, I want you to look at languages that you speak, okay, and see how such rules are going to apply in those languages. Keep in mind, these rules are not going to apply verbatim, okay. However, once you see the underlying pattern of these rules, they will help you understand underlying patterns of rules in the languages that you speak. And finally, you will see how language specific rules have to say about generic rules of language, and how these rules really work in our minds, okay. So, let me show you some of these things. Now, what is this about? This is about a singular word, right, and a plural counterpart, right. Everybody knows about singular and plural counterparts, right. So, how do we make plurals in languages in general? Now, the basic point is every language will have plural counterparts of singular nouns, okay. We have nouns that we make that become plural, and I am going to kind of rush through these things. I am not taking you through every single step, okay. I am going to show you, like I said, I am going to show you some of these from Hindi, and then I want you to apply them to English and to more specifically to your languages, right. Now, have you heard these words before, even some people who may not be speaking Hindi. Have you heard these words before? Right? And you have heard their plural counterparts as well. If we speak Hindi, we use these words quite often, and these are just few examples. So what's going on in this singular and plural counterpart? How is it working? How is this working?
We add another sound at the end of the word.
Sorry?
We add another sound at the end of the word to all the words.
We add another sound in the word
At the end of the word.
at the end of it. Do we just add, or do we do something else too? So if we have two words, one is, let's say, Gamala, right, or Kamara, and the plural is Kamade. Are we simply adding a sound to the end of the word, or we are doing something else with that? We are removing one, and only then we are adding the other one. See this thing? So if someone looks at the word Kamade, right, and you try to tell them, do you see the end of this word? And the marker at the end of the word is actually plural marker that we have added, right? This is one way to describe. But why should anybody believe you? If I am not a speaker of Hindi, I would simply say, look, this word sounds like just one word to me. Why should I believe you that the sound A at the end of this word is an addition of a sound? Do you understand my question? Why should we believe that this is an addition of a sound? This looks like a word to me, right?
Because it is happening with every word.
No, not necessarily. How is it happening with the other word? I have given you only 4 of them here, and it's not happening with even 4 of them.
A majority of the words.
Not necessarily. That I can tell you for sure. Not necessarily it happens with every single word. Now, before we go to that, let's focus on my question that I asked you. You understand the question? The question is, why should I believe that something has been added to the word? It looks like just one word to me. How will you convince someone that something has been added to it? Then the answer to that question is, we need to look at the singular counterpart, right? And then you can show systematically that the sound A is dropped, right? And only then, in place of that, there is another sound, right? And on the top of that, this addition of a sound has a meaning. Do you see? If I simply write a word, write a sound, let's say A, okay, or A, do these sounds have any meaning? Without looking at these words, do they have any meaning? No, right? But when they are added to a word, they have a meaning. Understand this? When they are added to a word, they have a meaning. There are names for these categories, but without those names, let me go ahead and talk about them. What's the meaning of this sound in this word? In these words, the meaning of this sound is what? Singular. The meaning of this sound is plural. Now everybody understands what singular is and what a plural is, right? Now see how when we are learning languages or a language or language itself, how language specific rules get triggered with the input. So once again, to remind you about the things that I have promised you, that I'll keep reminding you time to time, that when a child is learning a language, the child comes across with the words like Kamara and Kamade, and nobody tells them, or at least at the time when this input is coming to the child is not in a position or at the age to be told these things, that look, that you see at the end of it is a singular marker. A at the end of another word is a plural marker. Do you agree with me? It's difficult for us to see these things even now, right? So much so that we have to put these things in colors to see them clearly, right? So it's not possible for anyone to tell a child or for a child to see these things. However, what a child is figuring out, or the mind is figuring out by itself, is these things. Okay? There is absolutely no confusion in the mind of a child after the child has acquired the language that this is the plural formation pattern. See this thing? This is why, if I, without giving you this thing, if I ask you, can you write down in 5 minutes the plural formation rules of Telugu or Tamil? Take 20 nouns and see how nouns are changing in plural, and give me a rule or summary of rule or a set of rules which will apply to all the nouns across the board. A, it could not be done in 5 minutes, and B, it's very difficult to figure those things out. However, you know every single noun of your language, and you also know the underlying plural formation pattern of every single word of your language. That consists of knowledge of language, and then on the other side, it confirms that when we acquire language, these are the underlying rules of principles and parameters which are part of universal grammar that are getting triggered by language specific inputs. Okay? Now, what are such rules? Unless we look at these words, we don't even know that a particular sound may also have a meaning in a word. A particular sound may not have an independent meaning elsewhere, that is outside of a word, but in a word it may have a specific meaning. Also, and we don't stop here, also we know for sure that if this is the plural marker in a language like Hindi, this is not the plural marker across the board. This is a plural marker in only some words, right? For example, if you see word number 3, what's the word? And what's the plural marker? So plural of pani remains pani. Nobody has any confusion of that. Now, not only the plural form remains the same, but we know that the plural marker is 0, no plural. Now, someone can argue, someone can tell you there are descriptive grammars given to us which describe things like every a ending word will change to a. How many of you have taken Hindi classes? Anybody? Some of you at least, very nice. Were you told about plural formation rules? What were you told? Any idea? Others? Right. Words and rules.
Words and their plural forms.
Words and their plural forms. So, you were given every single word and their plural rules. Do you see the problem with that? At least now, if you are learning a language like Hindi, or I am learning a language like Telugu or Malayalam, how many words can I learn? What's the length of a semester? 40 hours, right? Which is, if you put it in terms of continuity, it's less than 2 days. See this thing? That we do over a period of, let's say, 13 or 14 weeks. How many words do you think I can learn if I am taking Telugu in a semester, or for that matter even if I take it for a year, 2 semesters including summer. If I need to learn every single word and then its plural marker, plural form, how many words do you think I can learn? Answer clearly is not all. You can learn as many as you want every day, but definitely it's never going to be an exhaustive list. Get this? Now, what else were you told? Anybody remembers? What else were you told? He is admitting that we were given certain words and its plural forms. Were you also told about the rule underlying it? No. So somebody was given, let's say, a word like kamada and told the plural is kamade, right? Something like this. Anybody else? Some words which do not have plural were also taught as an exception, right? So, one of the things that I remember from such classes is there is a rule that is taught that if you see a word ending in a, it changes to a, and if they don't, then they are exceptions, right? If they don't work that way, then they are exceptions. The idea here is not to show you the problems of teaching, and the idea is also not to blame the teachers. The idea is to show you there cannot be exceptions. If language is part of generative apparatus, then there cannot be exception to rules, because we are not talking about rules which okay, let me put it this way. We are not talking about some generic rules. We are talking about the rules that already exist. Remember what I have told you about what already exists? What is it that I have told you that already exists? Which is, if in a layman's term you have to describe universal grammar, how will you describe that? Right, we know those things intrinsically, but also that's a set of rules of all the languages of the world. If it's that kind of innate rule, how could such rules generate exceptions? See my point? The strength of a rule is such that it should not be able to generate exceptions. If you are generating exceptions, then if a rule is generating exceptions, then it's a weaker rule. Okay? You will learn about this particular aspect in your respective disciplines when you move ahead. Any rule that generates lot of exceptions, any rule that has lot of patchage is called a weak rule. Okay? So, the third and fourth will be examples of exceptions, right? That these things are exceptions. But that's not true. We are calling them exceptions only when we are looking at it not very carefully. If you look at them carefully, then you see that there is absolutely no exception to rules. And the rule is the following. The rule is, first we have to look at, if we are talking about a language like Hindi, then we have to look at 2 types of its gender. You know that there are only 2 types of genders in Hindi, which is every word can only be either masculine or feminine. Now, this intuition about a word, and mind it, I am calling it intuition. This intuition about a word is innate, is inbuilt. For example, okay, I'll give you this example in a moment. Every single word in Hindi, in a language like Hindi, must have a gender, and that gender must manifest in sentence. Okay? So, if I say a word like, let's say, give me any word in Hindi that you know. Aurat. It's what's the gender? Feminine gender, because that's a natural gender applies there. Hawa. So Hawa has what gender? You see that? Feminine gender. Shirt. What gender? Shirt. Kameez. Now, probably this is an unfair question to ask you. Okay. Now, my point is, a shirt is masculine in Hindi. And if we use for the same object a different word, let's say kameez. Have you heard these words? Shirt, kameez. The word kameez is feminine. Sorry? Go ahead.
The salwar kameez.
Not only salwar kameez, any shirt in Hindi is called kameez. Shirt is English word, right? In Hindi it's called kameez, right? Now that word is feminine. So another point to notice is there is, when we say every word must have a gender which is either masculine or feminine, we are not talking about the gender of the object. We are simply saying there is a gender associated with every word, which is arbitrary association, but it's inbuilt intuition. And this is also identification of someone being native speaker of that language. They will immediately figure it out without any training. You just give a word to a Hindi speaker or just listen to them speaking. Nobody needs to tell them that Hawa is feminine, right? Or a table, feminine or masculine? Nobody needs to tell them what it is. However, you know that there is nothing masculine about table and there is nothing feminine about Hawa, right? This is intuition. Now, based on that, if you look at the words of masculine gender, you find two types of words. One type which end with a. Okay? Only such word will change to a. Masculine words which do not end in a, like pani or ghar, they do not have their plural forms. Across the board. And this a to a rule applies only to masculine words. See my point? Applies only to masculine word, because look at this example that he gave you. What was the example? Hawa. Does this word end in a? What's the plural of this?
Hawai.
Do we see it as kamre or gamle?
As in we are adding this one, we are not dropping the a.
We are not doing, my point is, we are not changing this word the way we are changing kamra and gamla. Clearly tells you that that's not a masculine word. See the thing? Now, if you look at these two rules, then there is absolutely no exception. Similarly, if you look at feminine nouns of Hindi, okay, there are only going to be two types of feminine nouns. One that ends in long E. Am I making sense to you? We don't need to learn Hindi, or we don't need to look at it. I am only trying to show you the underlying pattern, right? Words that end in long E, such as ladki or gadi, and the words that do not end with long E. There are only two categories. Either they end with long E or they don't end with long E. If we are talking about masculine nouns, either they end in a or they don't end in a. Please pay attention to the second part. We are not saying they end in a consonant or a vowel or a particular type of consonant or a particular type of vowel. Nothing of that sort. We are only saying one type of masculine noun ending with a and the other type not ending in a. One type of feminine noun ending in E, that's a long vowel, and the other type not ending with E. And so that way we get four-way classification, and for each type there is a specific rule, and then that rule does not generate any exception. Okay? So a word like Hawa will fit where? Sorry? Feminine noun which doesn't end with long E. Right? And similarly, if there is a word which ends in long E, okay? Imagine there is a word which ends in long E, but it's not a feminine word. Okay? Which is, if it is not a feminine word, then it's going to be masculine. So can you give any, can you think of an example of such word? Pani. I already gave you this word pani. A word which ends in long E but doesn't have a, is not feminine, is not going to change. There is another word that I can give you. I only picked up few to make a point. You don't need to look at exhaustive list of them. Dhobi. Another very generic word, everybody must have heard this word. Dhobi means someone who washes clothes, right? Is it masculine or feminine? Masculine word. It doesn't, but it ends in long E. What do you expect? Will not change in plural form. Neither it's going to work the way feminine nouns work. Now there are only 4 types and 4 simple rules for them. If they end in A, then change to A. If they don't end in A, no change. If they end in, when we talk about feminine nouns, if they end in long E, they change in a particular way, right? And this is where I said I don't want to take you through every single step, because we don't need to learn these things. We only need to see a particular point. Now the second part of feminine noun, which is words that do not end with long E, they change in a particular way, right? Can you see the rationale that in this category we cannot say words that do not end in A, that do not end in long E will not change? We cannot say that, because if they don't change, then there will be no difference between masculine and feminine nouns, and that will create again confusion. Now, do you see how systematically they are classified and why they generate no exceptions and creates no confusion here? This is one particular rule which is language specific. Now, it's about Hindi. Now, I invite you to look at the underlying pattern of plural formation of your language. Okay? This is, I'm giving you this thing as an assignment, which is optional assignment. You don't have to submit it. See how categorically I have shown you the rules? Now, I had a plan to show you rules of at least one more language, which is English. But I leave that for you to figure that out also. Because English is one language which everybody has studied, which everybody has learned as second language. Or I remember some of you telling me you started learning English in kindergarten, right? Remember A for apple and B for boy? You haven't forgotten that yet. How did you learn plural formation? I just want you to think about that and then tell me how it works.
What's the question again? You want us to do the same thing for English?
I want you to do this definitely for English and tell me how it works. And also I want you to do for the language that you speak, which is language that you grew up with. Mother tongue. Take some examples and see the plural pattern of that language. Okay? That will be one application of something that you are learning. I am not going to give you such assignments every now and then, because we are going to move very fast and it's difficult in a semester, in a short period of class, for me to tell you to apply every rule to your language. However, you will get a taste of how it works when you are asked to look at your own language. If your own language looks difficult to you, just look at the language of your neighbor and see how it works. By neighbor I mean if you speak Tamil and Tamil sounds difficult, you can look at Malayalam or Kannada or Telugu, whatever you like. But everybody is definitely going to look at English. And I also ask you, feel free to consult any internet, any library, any resource at your disposal, people that you know, teachers you may have interacted with. Just feel free to interact with anything, consult anything, but please do work on this thing. Get my point? All right. Now this was just one underlying rules that languages operate with, and I wanted you to see. Any questions so far before I move? Any confusion about what I have just described, what you need to do? No? No? So you promise that you will do it? I don't see commitment in your promise. Go ahead.
Sir, are there no exceptions at all in any language when it comes to this?
Yes. And why am I saying so?
There are rules and
There are
Be-
exceptions.
on the simple reason of me saying so, not that I know all the languages. Underlying rules of language are such that they are not supposed to generate exceptions. Suppose we still find exceptions. That simply means we haven't looked at the rule hard enough. But see, I think you asked me this question yesterday, or somebody asked me this question. Do we have first words and then do we have first sounds and then we apply them in a format and get words? Right? Or do we have words and then we see them? Either way, the point is we have rules. And if we haven't come up with a rule of this type, I have given you a rule which I am convinced that there is no exception. I want you as a Hindi speaker, whether you speak Hindi or not, I want you to find one single example which doesn't work this way, which forms exception to this four-way categorization and these rules.
What about the times when we use plurals that end with O?
Such as?
Suppose Kamre, Kamra, Kamro.
Kamro is not plural. Kamro is not plural. I mean, it's a plural, but it has something else on it. Now, I don't want to start a Hindi class with you here. However, you are right. That's a very genuine question, very genuine concern. Kamro has more than plural. And if you are interested in this, look at some materials. What you will find is people use this word kamro only when there is something following it, which is called a postposition. Right? Like kamro mein or kamro ke bahar. We never use this word kamro or kamro without a postposition. So it's the effect of the following postposition on the previous word which turns it into kamro.
In that case, we don't discriminate words as masculine.
For plurals, yes, no. लड़कियों, कमरों, हवाओं, धोबियों, all of them work the same way. So that's something more than singular, plural, masculine, feminine. That's all I can tell you. About plurals and singulars, only what I have told you. Are you convinced that kamaro is something else?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So that's a different.
Because that rule is not found in my life.
Exactly. Very true. And I am convinced that you can see patterns very well, at least. And I am trying to show you patterns which are easy to see. Right? All right. Anything else?
Sir, if language was natural, how come Hindi has got this issue of like the nouns changing with the postposition, whereas other languages don't have?
Probably many would do. Many languages would work that way, not all. So what is important here is languages will have two-way categorization, let's say singular and plural. This is part of universal set of principles.
So all languages will have.
Singular and plural. Okay. However, language. What was the other part of your question? How come Hindi?
How come some like Hindi has got this postposition?
Postposition and its effect.
But then English doesn't.
English won't. Right.
Many languages don't.
So when we say on table, there is no change on the word table, whereas if we say on table or on tables, when you say on the table, you don't see any change in singular. What's in Hindi phrase on the table? No. On the table, singular.
Table per.
Table per. And when we say on the tables, tablon per, same thing is added that you were trying to add to what? Kamaron or gharon or larkon or larkiyon. Now, coming back to your question, this effect is restricted only to Hindi. You are right. This is not in English. Now, this is exact example of what we say parameters. That some rules are parametric in nature, where they will apply only to some languages and will not apply to others. This is what becomes responsible for differences in languages. Right? Otherwise, if there were no parameters, take it this way, if there were no parameters, then we'll end up with one language. See this thing? This is why both together, principles and parameters, help us understand what we say language, the underlying rules of language. We won't be able to see underlying rules of language only with the help of principles. We need to see that also with parameters. Making sense? Okay. Now, one more thing which I discussed with you yesterday, which is important for word formation rules, and then we move ahead in remaining few minutes. Okay. Now, are you familiar with these words? I thought you will be familiar with lot of them, therefore I haven't even added meanings to these words. Anybody who is not familiar with all the words? So what are the words? Can you read them?
Anga, Panja, Panja, Mumbai.
No, there are two of them. After Panja, the first one is Anda, Andha and Mumbai. Right? Have you heard Mumbai? Everybody? Andha? Andha means a blind man or blind. Anda? Heard this one? Panja? It means palm. Panja means a palm. I should have given meaning of these things, but nonetheless I can tell you that. And Kangha is a comb with which we set our hair. Right? Now, I want to show you something else. That is, I have shown you a rule which is a morphological rule where we add something to the word and they give a new grammatical meaning, which is plurals. Right? Right? Now I'm trying to show you something which happens word internally. Okay? This rule works internal to word. Alright? To wind up the story of word and move to sentence, I need to wind this up. Now, remember the story of clusters? What was the story of cluster? Two consonant sounds will form a cluster. In which way? One will lose, the first one will lose its vowel quality and then form the cluster. True? Now, if we apply the same thing to the clusters where a nasal sound is a part of the clusters, okay? The first consonant happens to be a nasal sound. Are you with me? First consonant happens to be a nasal sound. Then, how does it work? If you see the first one, what's the sound which is following the nasal? Gha. Which is, what's the place of articulation of this? Gha. Back, of course. Which one? Velam. Right? The next one? Ja. What's the place of articulation for that? Palate. Right? The next one is da. Da. It's a retroflex sound, right? In our language, it's a retroflex. And then the next one, da, a dental, right? And the next one is ba, which is bilabial. Do you see the example of all the five places of articulation in these words? Now, in each of these words, the first sound is a nasal. That is, in each of these clusters, the first consonant of that cluster is a nasal sound. Right? Now, the way it works is, if the following consonant is a labial, then the nasal is also labial. If the following consonant is dental, then the nasal is also dental. Okay? If the following consonant is a retroflex one, the nasal is also retroflex. If the following consonant is palatal, the nasal is palatal. And if the following consonant is velar, then the nasal is velar. So, in a word like kangha, right? Kangha, do you hear a nasal sound? Where do you hear this nasal sound? Right before gha, right? Now, what if we need to talk about it, which type of nasal is this? Right? This can only be a velar nasal. And how do we know that this is a velar nasal? Because the following sound is a velar one. In the second one, it can only be palatal nasal, because the following sound is palatal, and likewise in all of them. Now, besides being little bit fancy and interesting, what does this tell us? That if there are two sounds forming cluster, and the first one is nasal, right? That nasal and the following consonant must share same place of articulation. A nasal from a different place of articulation and the following consonant from a different place of articulation will not be allowed. Okay? Which means, in a word like, let's say, Mumbai, we have ma and ba. This consonant is a nasal, and it must only be bilabial nasal. In other words, a dental nasal, na and ba, this is not going to be a warranted sequence in a word. Okay? This is not going to be a warranted sequence in a word. Are you with me? Do you follow this thing? Then the nasal sound must match, I'm using non-technical term, The technical term for this is assimilation. That is, these two sounds assimilate each other's quality. This, because this is bilabial, this must be bilabial and not anything else. Therefore, not warranted. See this thing? Now, the examples that you see on the screen, these examples are from which language? Hindi, right? However, this rule is not specific to Hindi. What's the rule? The rule is, when we talk about a nasal sound and its following consonant, they must come from same place of articulation, right? This rule is not specific to Hindi alone. All right? Now, I can give you some examples from English, right? If I give you a word, I want you to write that word. Let's say the word is possible, okay? Possible and patient. Only two words, right? I want you to negate this. What's the negative of these two words? Impossible and impatient. Right? Did you write both? Right, next to each other. Now, one more example. Consistent. Consistent. Must have heard this word before. Consistent. English word. The negative is, I want to hear the word. Now, how do you write that? Let me first go to the writing. How do you write that? You can only tell me the first part. I-N. Do you write I-M? Why not? In the previous one we just saw, it was I-M. In the following one it becomes I-N. Right? Why is this I-M in the previous one? Because the P sound is labial. If the negative is coming before that, that must be a labial nasal, which is M. We cannot say impossible. Okay? We cannot say that. We cannot say impatient. We have to say impatient. Rather, we can put the same thing in the following way. It's really not a point that how we say that. This is how it is said. This is how it becomes. Because if the following one is a labial, it's easier to have the previous nasal also as labial. One moment before I come to you. Now, the second example that I have given you, which type of nasal is that? You have written them as I-N, right? And then only you write something consistent, right? Now, what's this sound? The sound is K, which is velar sound. The nasal must be a velar nasal. So it's not really inconsistent. It sounds different, or it is supposed to sound different. It is inconsistent, where the nasal is a velar nasal. See that? And you can find tons of examples in English or in other languages which is going to follow this rule. Now, this was just a language internal rule. The other one that I showed you is, this was word internal. The other was applying at the word boundary.
Why is it not unpleasant?
What is that?
For pleasant, it's unpleasant when you.
Well, that then it's a different thing. See, you are absolutely right. Let me first say that. Now, why am I saying that's a different thing? Is I am saying the following. If it must be nasal, then it has to be this way. Okay? Now, un is a different kind of prefix, which now then to understand that, we need to look at negative prefixes in English, and then we will be looking at language specific rules of English, right, which will fall in a different domain. Now, I am not taking a shortcut, I am not trying to avoid that thing, I am only trying to show you that there are some rules which may not be which may not be part of principle. This assimilation of nasals is a principle which works across language, right? So we are looking at word internal and things at word boundary. We are looking at rules that may not really change the meaning of a word if we are looking at Hindi, and we have looked at some Hindi examples where some addition to the word changes the meaning of the words. But these are the rules which help us understand structure of words, right? Likewise, we are going to see tomorrow rules that are going to be underlying but significant in formation of sentences. Okay? And then we will come to, once we understand such rules from sentences, with that we will conclude the story of sounds, words and sentences. And then I will take you to see more generic principles of language that apply across the board. Okay? Thank you.